Major John Mulaney news, but first let's start with late night. There's a new book, Secret Service Zero Fail, The Rise and Fall of the Secret Service. The book alleges that members of the Trump family got inappropriately close, is the phrasing, to Secret Service agents. The ex-wife of Donald Trump Jr., Vanessa Trump, started dating one of the agents. Colbert said, "I'd say that's unprofessional, but it wasn't secret, and I'm guessing someone was getting serviced." The former president apparently was consumed with getting overweight Secret Service agents removed from their posts. Colbert said he was particularly upset with the agent they posted in his mirror every morning. Think about it. The former president also proposed a multi-million-dollar renovation to dig up and replace all the lowered gates because he hated the bump when his limo drove over them. Colbert said, "I'm surprised the former president couldn't handle that. Rumor is Don Jr. loves a little bump." In other news, in California, Caitlyn Jenner is learning that running for governor isn't exactly like running in the Olympics. Jimmy Kimmel said Jenner admitted she didn't vote in the past election because she, quote, couldn't get excited about any of the propositions and chose to go golfing. Kimmel said instead of voting, she played golf. Maybe she should be running for president instead. Colbert wondered, what's happened to the GOP? Back in Liz Cheney's Father's Day, if you had a problem with a fellow Republican, you didn't stab them in the back. You shot him in the face on a hunting trip. Then you made him go on TV and apologize to you. There is a new celebrity couple. John Mulaney, recently out of rehab, recently returned to the stage, and recently announcing that he is getting divorced, is reportedly dating Olivia Munn. A source close to John Mulaney says, "This is very new. They're taking it slowly. They met at a church in Los Angeles. Reps could not be reached for immediate comment. Apparently, they first connected socially several years ago and remained friendly." In December, Olivia sent John some well wishes after Mulaney entered rehab. She tweeted, "Sending so much love and support to John Mulaney. You got this. If you're curious, John is 38, Olivia Munn is 40. In a 2015 Huffington Post interview, Olivia talked about being at a wedding with Mulaney and Mulaney's ex-wife. Wait, are they divorced already? Whatever. In the interview, Olivia said she was, quote, obsessed with him. "We were at a wedding together and I was like, oh my gosh, do you and your fiance want to go have dinner or something and hang out?" At first it was cool, and then I kept going up to him at the wedding like, "So you're having fun?" And I was just so obsessed with hanging out with him and talking to him. Munn added that she emailed the then engaged comic, but he never emailed back. Olivia said, "I might have gotten the wrong email. Probably. That's what I tell myself." The New York Post adds, "Looks like he finally responded." This is big news at the breakfast table. Even my wife was like, "Hey, are you following this John Mulaney stuff?" I think she forgets what I do for a living sometimes. Yeah, I'm following the John Mulaney stuff. What do you think I do? I get up in the morning, I Google comedians and comedy, and then I go down the basement and talk to myself. What do you think I'm doing? I will be curious to see how people react to this. I feel like the narrative of John Mulaney left his wife to date Olivia Munn isn't going to play well. Now, as I've lived for over half a century, I've learned, don't judge. You don't know everyone's story. I don't know what's going on, so I'm not going to judge on that. But as a professional observer of the world, I suspect people are not going to react well to it. Got a comment on Instagram. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Shagun wrote, "I liked him because of his wife. I know it doesn't make sense. Most of his material was based on his wife or related to her somehow." So we'll see how this shakes out. I'm sure we'll be talking about this a lot because that's a power couple. And John Mulaney, always one of the top comedians. It's going to be interesting. Patton Oswalt spoke to Empire about the dangers of being able to do anything he wanted with his M.O.D.O.K character. For the uninitiated, M.O.D.O.K stands for Mental Organism Designed Only for Killing. M.O.D.O.K was the subject of a terrible experiment. With his boosted brain powers and very little body, he's an endlessly frustrated villain with a chip on his shoulder bigger than his head. He's also dealing with a serious financial shortfall at evil organization AIM, that's AIM, and his marriage to Jodie is breaking up. The series is unafraid to generate laughs from all aspects of the villain's life. Patton Oswalt knows why there are so many shows taking a skewed look at superheroes. Patton says, when you really, really love something, you will not be able to see the flaws in it and you want to explore those. So with The Boys, that's a show on Amazon, you think, if a guy like Homelander did have these powers, wouldn't you also be an a-hole? And especially with M.O.D.O.K, if he has the superior 8-dimensional intellect, but he's a D-level bottom-tier supervillain, what does that do to him emotionally? That's a real thing to explore. We're exploring it comedically, but I think it comes from a very real emotional base that anyone can understand looking at it. So it was that kind of real-world frustration we wanted to get into and ended up having a lot of fun doing it. Patton's instinct initially was to load the show with references galore, deep cuts that Marvel true believers who've read every issue of the characters' various comics and more will enjoy. But one of the folks on the show pulled him back to focus on the more important issues, like story. Patton said, I was the kid who had gone trick-or-treating the night before, stayed up to 4 a.m. the night before, and brought back 5 pillowcases full of candy. Jordan was like, pick 20 and we'll put the rest in the freezer for you. We're not going to eat them all. Some of the people doing voices on M.O.D.O.K are, of course, Patton Oswalt, but also John Hamm, Bill Hader, Nathan Fillion, and Whoopi Goldberg. This thing is on Hulu in the States and Disney Plus Star in the UK, and that'll be out Friday. Looking forward to that. Steve Trevino spoke to the Chicago Tribune. Steve calls himself America's favorite husband, taking the reins from John Mulaney. Oh, that's a dig. But you laughed. Steve Trevino is a comedian from rural Texas, and he says his Mexican heritage informs who he is as a person, but his experiences are universal. He says, I consider myself Tex-Mex. I'm proud to be a Mexican-American comedian, but I consider myself more a comedian that happens to be of Mexican descent. Other comics talk about how different we are. I spend more time talking about how alike we are. His nickname, America's favorite husband, not to be confused with John Mulaney. You're smiling. You're smiling. You know you're smiling. You knew the joke was coming, and you're smiling. The nickname was out of the fact that I would get that all the time. I would get wives who would say, my husband needs to hear this. It's flattering, kind of weird when people would say, I wish you were my dad, but it kept happening. He'll be at the Chicago Improv this weekend, May 27th through the 30th, although May 29th is sold out. He says, Chicago is such a fantastic market for me. I usually end up adding shows. It's one of those places that feels like home, just a bunch of hardworking people who work hard and play hard. He does a podcast with his wife, Renee. It is called Steve and Captain Evil. Steve says, we live a very honest life, and we have a podcast where we discuss our life. My wife is a very confident, strong woman and a good sport. It's very balanced. I get my digs in. Renee gets her digs in. Here are the joys of life. Here are the joys of marriage. Here's us almost getting divorced. Here's us having a kid. It plays like a movie, which I love. Steve wants to keep his comedy relatable. He says, we all need comedy. We need to be entertained. That's where the Oscars in particular messed up. It was supposed to be our escape. Everything's so political. I'm here to entertain and be funny. You can laugh for an hour without thinking about the media or the fear. One thing I do at the end of the show, I always thank the veterans. Sometimes it's funny that people do that and make it political. Steve Trevino at the Chicago Improv, May 27, 28, and the 30th at 9:30 p.m. May 29th is sold out. Congratulations to Bill Engvall, who graduated yesterday from Grand Canyon University. Bill received his bachelor's degree in Christian Studies. He said becoming a minister is something he did after he saw everyone else getting ordained online. He thought he would do it. Why not? The idea tickled him. But when I got the certificate, I was looking at it and I thought, well, if I do this, I want to know what I'm talking about. And so he began a journey to finish what he never did 46 years ago. He graduated from high school way back when and attended Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas. Bill said, while I was there, I had 4 majors in 4 years, so I didn't really have any direction in my life at all. He thought for a time he might be a teacher. He even has an idea for a class for high school seniors. It would be called Life. Students on the first day of class would pick a slip of paper out of a bucket with a job title, and they would learn about that job. Bill says, it tells you how much you're going to make in a year, and then through the year you bring in people like credit card people, banking people. If the financial aid office had handed me a check for $4,800 at the beginning of the semester, I would have been like, this must be party money. He dropped out of college and said, I learned a lot about life and how to deal with people, but academically, I was not mature enough for college. He then became a comedian. I don't know if you knew that. He had a successful career in comedy, but going back to college was something he felt compelled to do. Everyone in his family has a degree, so why not him? Bill said, the comedy started taking off, so I didn't really have a chance to think about it that much, but it always kind of bugged me in the back of my head that I didn't finish something. He came across GCU's website, loved its mission statement, and loved the idea of being able to complete a bachelor's degree online. The next thing I know, I'm enrolled. I have a buddy who's a retired priest. I had some kind of interest in theology, and I read a couple books, and I felt like I really liked it. I was telling my wife, I wish someone had asked me what I was interested in. He told Kelly Clarkson on her show, I had to get a college math class, and it was hard. He thought about giving up a few times, said, I don't need this, but I was proud of myself because I stuck it through. There was a voice that kept urging me on, and we'll see where that voice takes me. I feel like religion has taken kind of a hit lately. I think maybe a lot of it has to do with the internet and social media and stuff. Attendance in 4-wall religions is on the decline, and I hate to see that because personally, I enjoy going to church. What he'll do with his degree, he doesn't know, but he says, where it leads to, I can't tell you, but I'm sure it'll be good. Bill Engvall is good people. I worked with him for, I think, 7 years on Blue Collar Radio at Sirius XM. And after I left Sirius and I landed at what's now called Live by Live, it was Slacker at the time, needed a favor, needed to show that I actually know people, and Bill Engvall did me a solid. He's a good guy. I always appreciate the people that remember you when you can't help them. You know, when you're running Sirius XM, every comedian will pick up the phone because they all want a show. But it's when you're between gigs, that's when you find out who the good people are and who is just using you. We'll get into that someday. Do you hear the therapy coming out? Yeah. Matt Besser spoke to Green Entrepreneur and said, when I'm shopping for cannabis, I don't like the pressure of being asked to smell the product. I started smoking pot back when they still called it pot, and I don't have that level of expertise to discern much from smelling it. I do it anyway, because it seems rude to refuse. I always feel like a phony, like when the waiter brings you the bottle of wine. If people went around the grocery store sniffing the milk and cheese the way people in dispensaries snort their cannabis, I would not do dairy. You want to go get a scented candle? Fine. You can smell the heck out of it. Seems reasonable. Otherwise, do all your smelling in the privacy of your own home. Smelling the weed is a tradition that goes back to the day when that was necessary. In the old days, you'd smell the weed to make sure it wasn't actually just weeds. You don't want your grass to really be grass. The first time I bought weed in Washington Square Park, I didn't bother to smell it. The guy who sold it to me said it was the legendary Thai stick. I had read about Thai stick, but had never smoked it, and I really had no idea what it looked like. I assumed it was marijuana, somehow in a stick form. I did not smell the Thai stick before I bought it. If I had taken a sniff, I might have smelled airplane glue, because that's what it was. But I probably took 3 toxic hits before I realized I had been burned. I was smoking a toothpick dipped in glue and covered in birdseed. Truth is, even if I had smelled the so-called Thai stick beforehand, I probably would have assumed it was exotic cannabis that smelled like airplane glue for some reason. Now, with COVID-19, it's no longer considered sanitary to have people sticking their nose in a mason jar filled with the good stuff. We have to go back to trusting that the weed is indeed weed and not weeds. There is a new episode of my other show. It's called The Weekly Comedy Thing. You'll find that for free on the Live by Live app. Type in LiveX Live as one big word, and you'll find the Live by Live app. There are several comedy radio stations, all of which I program there. You would particularly like Today's Comedy would be my guest. But the new episode of The Weekly Comedy Thing, it's a weekly show I do. It's the forerunner of this, but I can only talk in 30, 60-second bites. So here I can go a lot longer and go on and 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 on about stuff, as you well know. But there I keep it short, but I'm allowed to play comedy clips in between. Why don't I play them on the podcast? Rights issues, royalties, can't do it. Wish I could. But on Live by Live, that's all solved. So if I tell a story about, say, Kyle Kinane, then I play a bit by Kyle Kinane. This week, I'm spotlighting new-ish releases, and I say new-ish because I was doing some maintenance on the comedy library of clips that we play on the air, and I realized there haven't really been any new releases in a year now. So the new release bin isn't that new. So new-ish releases from Kyle Kinane, Al Madrigal, Joe List, and Sam Morrill. It's called The Weekly Comedy Thing on the Live by Live app. Type in LiveX Live. It's all free. Go do it. If you like what I do here, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. Some fans of the show even do the monthly membership. So you put in your information once and then once a month it buys me a coffee. I appreciate people who do that. Thank you very much. This morning I went to the donuts chain and I grabbed my iced coffee with butter pecan I'm doing lately, butter pecan and milk. And I'm walking out and the donuts chain employee goes, "John?" And I'm like, yes. He's like, "I think you accidentally ordered 2. And I'm like, "I did?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, all right, I'll take the second one anyway, because I'll probably just come back at 12. So I might as well just do it all in one trip. So this morning I got 2 iced coffees with butter pecan and milk. If you like what I do, support the show. buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews. Throw $5 in the tip jar. Follow the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Show had another big week for downloads. I appreciate you all, and I will see you tomorrow.